As a midlife woman, you may or may not be aware of your level of diabetes risk. This episode intends to help you realize, either way, that you are in control. We include what may be reminders for many of you or new points of awareness for others. I'm talking with Dr. John Whyte, the Chief Medical Officer for WebMD, about his new book. Take Control of Your Diabetes Risk is available wherever books are sold, and yet don't go get it yet. Tune into this episode first because you're going to love what he said. I definitely got a mic drop moment from him, and it was followed by a comment we can all relate to all too well. Just stay tuned till the end in this relatively short episode. We also discuss some resources that you can use, and I'll add those to the show notes as well. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset, sometimes about the first two, so you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. And let's dive in. I cannot wait to introduce you to my guest. Dr. John Whyte is the Chief Medical Officer of WebMD. In his role, he leads efforts to develop and expand strategic partnerships that create meaningful change around important and timely public health issues. Prior to WebMD, he served as the Director of Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Let's dive in. Dr. Whyte, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to chat with you.
Well, it's quite an honor. So it's not every day I get to say someone from WebMD has been here. So,
well, thank you.
So I got questions for you,
Sure.
and you. I know you've done your homework as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this is my 38th year full time in fitness, so
Yeah.
it's a pain that I have to say this. Why do we have a diabetes epidemic in the United States? I mean, after all the information we do have, we're privy to, how did we get here?
Sure. And it's primarily type 2 diabetes. So even if we took a step back, type 1 diabetes is insulin deficiency. Mm-hmm. Your body actually, destroys cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. So you actually have to take insulin for the rest of your life. Here we're talking about type 2 diabetes, where it's insulin resistance. Initially, your body still makes insulin. It makes a lot more insulin than it should. It's kind of like that cell phone charger that doesn't work, that you connect to your phone and it's not picking up the charge. That's what's happening in our body with type 2 diabetes, where we're not responding. We're resistant to the insulin. So we can't get that glucose, that energy into our cells. And I have to tell you, and you'll be shocked to hear this, perhaps 90% of type 2 diabetes is caused by lifestyle, and it's mostly obesity. We have an obesity epidemic as well, and that's contributing to the diabetes epidemic and the pre-diabetes epidemic.
Yeah, so true. And we know about this, right? What caused it?
Well, recently we've all been home on Zoom calls, and I've gained at least 10 pounds over the pandemic.
I know somebody.
Many people have. And, it's been a challenge because, as you know, we're not moving as much. Mm-hmm. In many ways, as we advance technologies around the world, we see greater incidence of diabetes. So we move less, because we drive everywhere. We don't even get up to change the TV. Remember when we used to do that? You had to get up and literally turn a channel to do it. Now you can, sit down and everything is done remote. And then so much food has become processed. even ultra processed. And sometimes it's confusing. You're eating, these frozen foods that have fancy names like chicken marsala, right? And marguerite pizza that you're taking out of a cardboard box. And it sounds like it might be healthy, but it's really not. So it's really a combination of taking too many calories in, not putting enough calories out, and also not dealing with the stress in our life. I mean, what I love when you said you've been in fitness all these years, but the difference I would say is you've created a love affair with fitness, right? It's not a chore. It's not a burden. Too many folks look at as exercise as something that is, burdensome to them or something that they don't look forward to. And we really need to change that mindset.
Yeah, so true. So literally 38 years ago, when I first emerged into the fitness field, the statistic has not changed.
Yeah.
The amount of people who were, using physical exercise at the level or frequency that will help and improve health, let alone fitness, has not changed. Yeah.
I know. Why is that?
Well, wait a minute. This is how it goes. I'm the interviewer. You.
Right.
Okay.
I know. It's fascinating.
I ask the questions here.
Okay. All right.
But what you've alluded to is when you're talking lifestyle habit, it's more epigenetics than genetics. Would you say that's true? It's not that we didn't choose our parents wisely. It's something else.
Right, absolutely. And we've been seeing the role of epigenetics in really the last few years of research. We used to say that, it's your genetic code that matters in terms of what diseases you get in your life. But in many ways, it's your zip code, where you live, what activities, how exercise impacts our cells, how food impacts our cells at the genetic level. That's what we're learning. And that's what's really interesting. Even when we would say, and there is a genetic component to diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. I don't want to dismiss that by any means. But what we've learned is that it's really lifestyle that plays the biggest role in type 2, even if you have that genetic predisposition. And sometimes even when we think we have that genetic predisposition, a parent has it, a sibling has it, sometimes it's shared behaviors, right? So you might have come from a clean the plate club. So you never leave any food extra.
Starving children.
Right. The types of food that you eat can be very consistent among families. Perhaps it's a lot of breads, a lot of processed foods, a lot of, sugary foods and ice cream. And even how families engage in physical activity. Some family members will all take a walk together. So you're learning these activities, and others, might play basketball as a family, and others may choose, to watch a lot of television. So even sometimes when we think it's a genetic component, it's really a lifestyle aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally see that. And that piece is the genetic part. Okay. So we're talking type 2 diabetes. Is it possible to reverse it entirely, or at least to prevent it from occurring, even if you are at risk genetically?
I love this question, because if you asked me this question 5-7 years ago, I'd give you a different answer than I'm going to give you now. And what I would have told you is 5-10 years ago, we thought that once you were diagnosed with diabetes, 50% of your beta cells have already died. So you've compensated for a while. So by the time you're finally diagnosed, you've lost a lot of those beta cells, which are responsible for producing insulin. But what we've learned over the last few years is that many of these beta cells, not sure if they can regenerate, but many of them can regain their function. And when that's the case, that allows us to perhaps reverse diabetes, particularly pre-diabetes, or at least delay its progression, particularly if we intervene early, usually within the first 3 years of diagnosis. That's what's really exciting, because It used to be, well, once you get it, you're never going to go back to a normal life. You're going to be on insulin. And that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of things that people can do to delay medication, to reduce the number of medication, or to return their blood sugar to normal. And much of the data has focused on it's about losing 5 to 7% of your body weight. And for many people, that's 15 pounds, maybe 20 pounds. It's not the 30, 40, 50 pounds that most people think they need to lose in order, to get that health benefit.
So let's talk about that. Let's break that one apart.
Yeah.
So on our channels and community, we talk a lot about what kind of weight we're losing, right? So when we're talking about blood sugar levels, it is important that we're not just looking at the number on the scale. Speak into that a little bit.
That's absolutely right. And, I want to point out is there's no spot reduction in terms of weight loss. Everyone talks about that midsection. And I'll tell you, that's important. The medical term we use is central adiposity. So central is that, central part of your body, which is the midsection, and adiposity is fat. So the reason why central adiposity is so dangerous is it's not just excess skin and poundage. It's metabolically active. What it's doing is releasing hormones, leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, but they're all working in the wrong direction. So instead of the hormones are being released to tell us that we're full, we're satiated, something called satiety, it's actually going in the wrong direction and it's making us eat more. It's it's increasing our blood sugar through elevating cortisol. So that's the reason why reducing fat around the midsection is so important. We also have developed fat around important organs such as the liver, and that we can't see. Sometimes we can tell that by a blood test or an ultrasound. But overall, it's really thinking about body composition too. And many scales nowadays will tell you your percent muscle, your percent body fat. And that's important to look at as well. And nowadays, we have wearables, trackers, and sensors on our wrists and on our rings, that on our fingers, that collect important data that you can use to help guide you in getting healthy and taking control of your diabetes risk.
Great. Love to hear that. We're going to dive into exercise potentially a little bit more. I've got a question, but while we're on this, I want to talk about a lifestyle habit, sleep. How important is that?
Sleep is critically important. And part of the challenge is, I hear patients that will say things like, "Oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead," right? Like that.
I heard that
funny.
one.
I have too many.
I've been told that one by bosses before.
Right, like, yeah. I have too much to do. It's always the lowest priority, right? We always say we'll catch up on sleep on the weekends or we'll catch it another day. But think about how you feel after a poor night's sleep. Nobody feels good. If you had to stay up late for work or if you had a sick child, you feel lousy. So think what's happening to your body when you're chronically sleep deprived, if you're having trouble sleeping 3-4 days a week. And if you get the flu or you feel sick, what's the first thing that you do?
Sleep.
Say, I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to rest, because intuitively, you know that you need for your body to regenerate. And what we see during sleep is immune function improves. We see that white blood cells increase if there's infection. That's one of the reasons why you're going to sleep. It's instinctive to help protect you. So when we have poor sleep, it goes back to the physiologic reason. There's really three important hormones: cortisol, melatonin, orexin. I don't want to give a whole primer on a biochemistry course, but the point is that they're going in the wrong direction. And cortisol should be, at nighttime low. And that's how we awake in the morning when it's higher on this, circadian rhythm. And when we mess that up, it messes up our blood sugar control. So even if you did all the things right that we're talking about, eating healthy, being physically active, and you're not sleeping well on a chronic basis, you're still going to have trouble controlling your blood sugar.
Great comment. And I'm going to pick apart something you just said. You said, even if you're doing all the things, and you included eating healthy, that in 2022, for a lot of midlife women, 50 and 60, is a moving target because it's not what they learned as a young adult. Can you talk a little bit about eating healthy? How do we define that? How does an individual woman listening define that for herself?
Right. And it's really thinking about food as medicine. That's what I tell people. It's as powerful as a prescription drug in terms of impacting all aspects of your body. So do you want to eat an orange, or do you want to eat, a bag of potato chips? And those are some of the decisions that we need to think about. There's a French phrase, I'm not going to use it, but basically it says, show me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. Because it's really this concept, you are what you eat. So when we think about healthy eating, I always tell my patients, I don't want you to focus on some fad diet, right? That you're going to follow for, 4 weeks, but rather patterns of eating, styles of eating. It's really what you include as well as what you exclude. And as we all get older, particularly for women, we have to think about what we're eating. Women develop heart disease later in life, unless they have diabetes. So I'll point that out. If you have diabetes, your risk of heart disease is much earlier. Otherwise, your risk of heart disease is in your 60s. The risk of rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis. What is that healthy diet that you're eating? It should be full of antioxidants. These are, these chemicals that help reduce clots in your brain and in your blood vessels. So they're going to prevent stroke. They're going to prevent heart attack. Where do you get that from? You get it from fish. You get it from fruits and vegetables. You want to have whole grains, unless you have celiac disease or an issue with gluten. There's lots of health benefits from whole grains, particularly in keeping our blood sugar pretty normalized throughout the day rather than these ups and downs. One of the things we used to think that, wine was okay and alcohol was okay. Heck, it might even have a health benefit. But now we're starting to see that's not the case. That doesn't mean you can never have a glass of wine. Doesn't mean you can never have a bag of potato chips. But it's about thinking about, what are your daily choices over time, and trying to have more healthy days in terms of eating than we have unhealthy days. Only 20% of Americans eat fish twice a week. 20%. The rest are even less. So that's one of the biggest changes that people can make right away, to replace some processed meal with fish.
Easy.
To eliminate all beverages, I say, except water. You'll automatically lose weight. Your blood sugars will automatically get under better control. They do. It's happened to
Somebody's
me.
listening and thinks you're a buzzkill right now.
I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes there is this perception that eating healthy or being healthy is not fun. Right? Like you can't have anything that you enjoy. That is just wrong. Food in many ways is an acquired taste. I mean, there's some debate about, the release of endorphins by certain type of foods, but we're not pre-programmed to like, filet mignon. As opposed to something else. We learn it. And I'll tell you, I used to drink soda, and then I knew it was unhealthy. So I switched to diet soda. And, there's not great data that helps. But then you know what? I switched to sparkling water. I mean, this was over many months, with some ups and downs. But now if I drink a soda, I'm like, this tastes like syrup.
Sticky
But I had loved it before. And now I like water. It's the same thing. I remember I used to drink whole milk, and then I switched, to skim milk. And at first I was like, this is like drinking water, and then when I went back to whole milk, one day I drank it by accident because my kids drink whole milk as they should at their age. I'm like, this is like cream. Did I get the cream? And I say that because food really is an acquired taste. And the good news about that is you can unlearn certain foods and learn new foods, and you can have a lot of fun with it. too. And it's not a buzzkill. It's not.
I'm
But people
so
think it
glad.
is.
Yeah, it is. It's an association, but I think it's an acquired association because of the way, for many of the women listening who are in their 50s and 60s, that's what the diet deprivation kind of roller coaster that
Yes.
many of us have gone through more than once. And that's our mental, if I'm going to do this, then that truth. Okay, I really want to cater to our midlife women here. And we know that more and more of them do. They will come to me and they will say, I was just told I'm pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
It's an insult and a
Yeah.
shock, and it scares them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that specifically. I mean, how do hormones play a role? Because that's the common denominator when it's happening
Absolutely.
now. Many of them know they've become more sensitive to carbohydrates. I think so many of them will flirt with keto for that reason. Yep. And please, listeners, here, I'm not saying that's the answer, and I think you can sway too far in the opposite direction. But let's unpack what might cause this to be happening, especially for midlife women.
That's absolutely right. In terms of hormones, particularly the role of estrogen. And estrogen is very protective against the heart. And that's why women typically don't see heart disease until their 60s, as I mentioned earlier, unless they have elevated blood sugar. So there's really a cascade of things that are going on as women approach middle age that really needs to be a wake-up call to really focus on self-care and take control of their own health and make some of those decisions. So not everyone with prediabetes has the typical warning signs of diabetes, which are you urinate a lot, you're thirsty a lot, you may gain weight. And I'm glad that there was a blood test done that picked up this potential warning. And the reason why it's important is that 10% of people with prediabetes progress to diabetes every year. So, over the span of a lifetime, that's a large percentage of people that are going to get diabetes. And diabetes is the number one cause of blindness, something called diabetic retinopathy, number one cause of kidney disease. I can go on and on. I don't want to scare people, but it's really about recognizing there's changes in your body that are going on that are going to put you perhaps at increased risk for certain conditions like diabetes, like heart disease. And what can you do? And what's your new way of thinking about your body and how you think about health? You mentioned keto. A lot of people are asking me about intermittent fasting. And there's a lot of different ways to do intermittent fasting. And there can be value. Sometimes there's value just because you're eating less.
Right.
And what I would say is you don't want to just eat less of bad food.
True.
Because you will lose weight even if you're eating less bad food. You want to eat healthy food as well, right? Those foods that are superfoods that have powerful antioxidants that we talked about, that have other ways to protect your heart, to protect your blood vessels, reduce your risk of stroke, reduce your risk of dementia. And that's as women get older, they're always the caregiver, right? They're taking care of their spouse, they're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of their parents. They need to take care of themselves as well and focus on their own health. And all too often I see them focused on everyone else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a common denominator there every listener can identify with. We are living the prediction that we would be the sandwich generation. Mm-hmm. And yet I don't know any midlife woman coming who will not be that, right? There's 3 generations looking at her, depending on her, and she's influencing them. So we need to take care of her.
Absolutely.
So that said, some of that caregiving causes a little stress. What's the role of stress in diabetes?
Stress plays a significant role. And when we're stressed, say we have an overbearing boss, we're stressed by, the responsibilities that we have at home, we make mistakes, right? Maybe that presentation isn't going to be as good. Maybe, when I'm rushed, you might forget to put something in your child's lunch. does happen when you're stressed and rushed. And the reason why I point that out is think what's happening at a cellular level, right? At the cells of your body, they're making mistakes. And it promotes insulin resistance. Back to this idea of type 2 diabetes, where your cells aren't responding as they should. That's the problem with chronic stress. Some stress is okay. We started it from an evolutionary standpoint. You want to, escape that, animal that's running to you. Some stress is important. It's the daily stress where you have, almost daily abdominal pain or issues with diarrhea, where you have palpitations, you feel your heart racing, you have headaches, you're anxious. Those are the things that we want to think about. And something that I have learned during the pandemic is the role of mindfulness, the role of meditation, which I really didn't think about prior to the pandemic, but it can play a role in helping to reduce stress. But it's like exercise. You have to work at it. You can't just go in a room, close the lights, and say, okay, this is, I'm going to spend 2 minutes and this is mindfulness. It's not. I mean, there are a lot of good apps out there that are free and that can help guide you through mindfulness and meditation and really reprioritizing. And as you talked about, a lot of folks are not good at saying no. Mm-hmm. Right. And sometimes you have to learn how to say no, not to take on too much.
Great point. Great point. So that you can say yes to you. And then ultimately, yes to more people. I love that. And so, listeners, if you're here and you're inside the cafe, or if you're not, I'm going to make you want to be. Every month we do a challenge. And I am no meditation guru, but I'm an exercise psychologist and believe in the power of intention and in putting that placebo of feeling and emotion into us so we can create oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin hits. And if those are high, cortisol can't be. So there's
That's absolutely right.
Control, what we can about including or allowing stressors in. But sometimes that darn meaningful life and those meaningful people create stress, and it's just going to be that way. So we can counter it or balance it with putting in the positive. So I think that's something for us all to remember. It's just if you can create that feeling in your body with visualization, like putting yourself in a moment where you've been extremely happy, you can help yourself decrease that cortisol level.
Yeah. The other thing I learned during the pandemic, I don't know if you've heard about this, are gratitude journals.
Yeah.
And I tried this where you write down every day, you have to be consistent and do it every day, one thing that you're grateful for, just one thing. And this isn't just like mumbo jumbo and stuff. There actually have been studies where looking at PET scans of people that went through this trial of doing a gratitude journal every day and actually saw those regions of the brain that are associated with anxiety light up less, right? So they were not as active, those areas of the brain associated with anxiety and depression, versus those that didn't use a gratitude journal. So there's some science behind it about the ability to rewire the brain and actually address stress by, as you said, kind of creating that positive environment and that positive mindset, as best as you can. There really is a mind-body connection that we don't acknowledge enough.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I want to get into the body, right? So heck with the mind. No, not really. But there are kinds of exercise choices that a woman can make. And it comes down to, based on what we just talked about, is time. I think we get on this tighter ship. We have precious time. And sometimes when there's confusion, we don't choose anything because we really don't know. Should I go to Pilates? Should I do my yoga? Should I go for a walk? Should I do my weights? And then it's like you're sitting and spinning and it's time to make supper. So what kinds of exercise choices do you find make the biggest difference when it comes to diabetes?
It's really a combination of exercises, ideally. Often women will focus a lot on cardio, and there is, benefit to aerobic exercise. And sometimes that's because, you don't need any special instruction. Overall, it can be more enjoyable. But strength training also plays an important role in diabetes risk reduction in terms of weights. And that doesn't mean that you have to lift a bunch of dumbbells. You can do, body weight, such as push-ups, but strength training is important. And I often do hear from women, well, Dr. Whyte, I don't want to get muscular. And with, a reasonable reason, they're not going to get muscular. It's also hard to get muscular as we get older for men or women. But I've never seen a woman that just started exercising and became like a bodybuilder. It just doesn't happen like that. But I say that because I don't want women to be scared of doing strength training.
Right.
And I think that's an important component. But, the other thing is I talk about in the book, it's not for everyone, high intensity interval training, a lot of good data. Even this 16-minute routine, 4 minutes a day, 4 days a week, you do 30 seconds of running in place all out or some other type all out activity, followed by rest for 30 seconds and repeat that for 4 minutes over a span of 4 minutes. You do that 4 times a week, that's 16 minutes. They actually saw reduction at 6 months of blood sugar returning back to normal in those people that were consistent. I mean, it truly has to be high intensity. It can't just be, I'm doing the best I can.
Right.
Because it's the elevating heart rate. And I have a lot of patients, a lot of women who will say to me, Dr. Whyte, I'm walking 10,000 steps a day. Like, why aren't I losing weight? Like, this is crazy. And I say, you have to put some intensity. Sometimes folks create walking clubs I've seen in neighbors, and I'm just going to be honest. What happens sometimes, there's a lot of chatter, right? There's not a lot of talking. There's not a lot of exertion. And I tell them, as you probably know, the talk test, right? I'd rather you do some power walking, right? So instead of going for an hour walk or a 45-minute walk, do 10 minutes of power walking or interrupt your walk by power walking where, it's difficult for you to talk. Right. So you're getting your heart racing. You're putting some exertion. Exertion does matter when it comes to exercise, because what we're trying to do as it relates to diabetes, exercise makes our cells more sensitive to insulin. So remember, I said type 2 diabetes is insulin resistant. So exercise is going to make our cells take up glucose. And that's a good thing because we're going to be more responsive to insulin. I mean, exercise is as close to a magic pill as we can get. And I tell people...
Mic drop. Thank you very much.
it really is. And people are always like, I need a magic pill. It is. I mean, it improves insulin sensitivity. It releases, those powerful endorphins. No one ever says after a run, going to the gym, going for a swim, I wish I didn't go, right? There might be a lot of resistance to going. But once you go, you feel like you're king of the world. You have energy. Again, think what's happening at the cellular level. And, people are fearful of starting. So, sometimes it's just, starting and building up. Do 5 push-ups in the morning, 5 push-ups at night, less if you can't do that, or a modified push-up. I like push-ups because there's very few excuses not to do push-ups because there's lots of different ways. But then you build up. And what I tell people all the time is, I'm not interested in where you'll be 3 months from now. I'm interested in where you're going to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, because most of your friends and family members are going to have gained weight. And even if you just lose a pound every other month, think where you're going to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now. That's real progress, and you'll have sustained it. So we need to change that mindset. And that goes back to choosing the activities you enjoy. Don't choose swimming if you, if you don't like to get wet and you don't have the time. It takes a lot more time. I always find swimming is like early in the morning, and I'm just not a morning person. So you have to choose activities that you like. So exercise isn't perceived as a chore, right? But it's something that you really can enjoy. And I really think it has tremendous value and really is that magic pill when it comes to your overall health, but particularly diabetes.
Beautifully said. We like to say here that muscle is like a sponge for blood sugar.
It absolutely is. That is exactly right. And I'll tell you, I was using a continuous glucose monitoring for a while because I was very interested in how these work. Yes. Where it's like this quarter size device that you put on, part of your body, and it's showing your blood sugar over time. And it was amazing how on the days that I'd exercise, I'd see my blood sugar is pretty consistent throughout the day. Like, this is my personal data, my personal response. Like, how much more do I need to know to see that? And I think if more people saw that and saw the response that they had, I think they would embrace it more.
Love that you've said that. So I've done the continuous blood glucose monitor and shared it with the audience. Kind of did one in February, did one again during the course of a move, April to May, and looked at what I learned. And then when I brought it back, what I tested a little bit more deeply to see how changing sequence of foods, how adding a walk after meals did matter. Lots of little things, again, like you said, it's not a major thing. It's, changing the order of the foods that you're eating can make a big difference. I love that.
I love that too, because it gives you your data. And I think you're right. It's not the major changes that people have to make. It's often small changes that will result in better blood sugar. I wish more people had access to these devices. Sometimes they're hard to get through insurance, but I agree. It's very worthwhile. And some other devices are out there too that are useful.
Yeah, so agree. Okay. So it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And it's been wonderful. So many gold nuggets. Is there any question that I didn't ask you that I should have?
I would say I often get asked, why did I write it? And the reason why I wrote it is, and I'm a physician, I still see patients. I think doctors sometimes are too quick to put people on medication because we say, go lose weight, eat healthy, and we don't give them the specifics of what to do, how to do. So I wrote it really to empower people to realize that there's a lot that they can do to take control of the risk, that they have the ability to make some changes. And if they do that early on, they often can at least put their pre-diabetes or diabetes in remission. Not for everyone. Some people are going to need medication, but I want to give them more knowledge. And that's why I wanted to write the book and talk about it.
Well, I'm thrilled you did. It's going to be a great resource for our audience. And where can they get more Dr. John Whyte?
Sure. Well, so I'm at WebMD, which is webmd.com. 75 million people come to the website every month. So I hope folks are coming. If you go to the homepage, you'll find me there, as well as information about the book. And the book is sold at Amazon and wherever books are sold. It's called Take Control of Your Diabetes Risk. And on social, I'm at Dr. John Whyte on Twitter, Instagram, and all the other platforms.
Fantastic. Thank you again for being here. Okay, listeners, it's now your turn. I know you got a lot out of it. I love to hear a comment from you or a question about the episode. If there's something that you wish I would have asked Dr. Whyte, please leave it below the show at flipping50.com/diabetes risk. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.